She was quite an ordinary woman, born and raised in Malden. She married the butcher, but she, like a lot of Essex girls, in ways we still recognise today, she was a bit stubborn. She spoke her mind. You couldn't shut her up easily. She was very loyal and protective of her family and her community. She looked out for people as best she could. And like a lot of people in Essex, she was allergic to bullshit. You know people like that, I'm sure. She didn't tolerate bollocks lightly. If something was happening, especially authorities trying to put a thumb down on someone she knew, she wouldn't have it. She had to say something. She had to do something about it. Now, in the 1620s, when she was running the butcher's shop with her husband, there are plenty of stories of her fined for not going to church on a Sunday, because she said she'd start going to church when how was she expected to do her housework if she was in church? Maybe if they got someone to do her work for her, maybe then she'd think about going to church. Thanks very much. She got in trouble because she called a judge a bloodsucker. And she even got in trouble because when a bailiff came round to take something off her husband, the butcher, she beat him up with a stick. She went to town on this bailiff, and I'm sure we all know a couple of Essex women who, yeah, maybe you would, given the chance, they would maybe do the same. But when Anne was alive, times were hard. There was an economic depression. A lot of people had lost their jobs in Malden and around here in Essex, because back then a lot of people's jobs was in the textile industry. We made a lot of money in wool and cloth, which we still then export all over the world. But there was a depression. The price of cloth had dropped because nobody was buying it, so a lot of people had lost their jobs. At the same time, there had been a lot of poor harvests. So what food there was left, the price had skyrocketed. A lot of people had lost their jobs. Prices of things are going up, but people's wages staying the same, or if anything, they were losing their jobs at all. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Well, as we know, people's tensions can get raised in those times a little bit. Especially when the grain and the food that was grown in Malden, instead of going to the starving families locally here, was being sold abroad to the highest bidder. Licenses granted by none other than King Charles I himself, who was trying to make a little bit of money for himself. So the starving families of Malden would watch the food that they had grown be loaded onto barges and be sold across the channel to some Flemish merchant or someone from Belgium. Well, Anne wasn't very happy about this. In 1629, there was a boat from Barrow Marsh, so it would be just, if we walk around the coast that way, it would be more just off the coast there. She led 100 women and children to storm one of these boats loaded with Malden grain. They charmed the sailors to stand aside, and these women and children filled their hats and their aprons with whatever grain they could take, and they took it back and they distributed it around all of the families of Malden. Now, the authorities didn't look very kindly on robbery, burglary of goods from a foreign vessel, so they hauled Anne up and some of the other women, but they weren't charged with burglary. They were let off because 400 years ago, a woman was seen as somebody who couldn't get in trouble with the law because a woman was not her own legal object. A woman just belonged to whoever man they were married to or whoever had fathered them. And so when these women got into trouble, they didn't really know what to do. Because after all, how much trouble could a woman cause? So Anne got a slap on the wrist and they let her off. Don't do it again, they said very sternly, or next time there'll be trouble to pay. So Anne had gotten away with it, but of course, that grain got eaten, and those bellies got hungrier. Those women and those children were still starving once more. Anne could have just gone back to the butcher's shop. She could have said, oh, I got away with that one, and I better quit while I'm ahead and not get in any more trouble like they said. But Anne was a stubborn lady, and Anne would not see her fellow people of Malden, her fellow families, suffer while rich people ate their food. So what did Anne do? She rode around Witham, Braintree, Bocking, all of the other towns of Essex, having enlisted the local baker as a secretary to write pamphlets to go ahead of her, to rally people to her cause, to do something about it. All the other towns where people had also lost their jobs and gone hungry as well. Come, my brave men of Malden. I will be your leader, for we will not starve. Those were her words, and the pamphlets were signed Captain Anne Carter. From her words, she rallied 300 men and women to come and do something about this injustice. And before long, more ships were raided, grain was taken and distributed to families, and even in the warehouses as well. Everybody got in on it to try and take some of that food and distribute to local people on a scale more than the first time it had happened. Well, this time, the authorities wouldn't let it stand. They hauled Anne up once again, and they said that because she called herself Captain Anne Carter. Captain was a man's title, so they could try her as a man. So perhaps, if she'd renounced that title, she pleaded her womanhood again, maybe she would have gotten away with it once again. But Anne was proud of what she'd done. She'd seen that there was no crime in her eyes, so she stood her ground, she stuck to her guns, she remained Captain Anne Carter, and they hung her the next day. Wow. Yeah. The day after the trial, they hung her in Chelmsford, and that was the end of Captain Anne. But 400 years later, her legend remains. I mean, even around Malden, she's a bit of a divisive figure. People know her name, but people think about her in different ways. Because there are some people that think of Captain Anne as nothing more than a violent criminal. Burglar, rabble-rouser, hell-raiser. She broke the law, she was a criminal, and she deserved everything that she got. And there are some people who would say that she was an Essex girl Robin Hood. Yeah. Robbing from the rich to feed the poor, and doing what she thought was right to protect her community, stop people from going hungry in the face of injustice, and that what she did is a very brave thing indeed. Now, which one of those is true? That's for you to decide, not for me to say. But either way, regardless of how you see her, even though she lived the life of an ordinary woman, she has surely become one of the most extraordinary Essex heroes that this county has given birth to in our own way, and definitely an Essex woman that I think even today we can all recognise in some way. Because although the stereotypes about Essex women are out there, and with tarring everyone with one brush is one thing, I think sometimes, especially for those of us that live here, it's important that we reclaim the kernels of truth in those stereotypes, and we see the qualities in these people from Essex, in these women, that make us proud of doing the right thing, whatever that might be today. And I think sometimes we can draw on the courage of Captain Anne, so when we see troubles that affect our communities, wherever they may lay. So, here's to you, Captain Anne.
Yay.
Thank you. Wow.